Hey, welcome to the Gaming Bench. Today I'm going to build an ancient game called Seega. This game was popular in the 17th and 18th centuries, mostly in northern Africa, notably in Egypt. I have a whole video that talks about the rules, history, and strategy of the game. I'll link that down below. Now, normally when I build these ancient games, I want them to look like their ancient counterparts, but I haven't been able to find any photography or illustrations of what a Seega board might look like. Presumably that's because the Bedouins who played this game would play it by poking holes in the sand and then using rocks as playing pieces. So I'm going to make a board out of wood so it's a little more durable. Let's get to it. Seega is played on a 5x5 grid. The pieces can look like anything, but I'm going to make mine look like checkers. In my experience, you either want to build the board first and then size the pieces to that, or build the pieces first and then size the board to the pieces. Otherwise, you run the risk of having a board where the pieces look too dinky or the pieces look too chunky on the board. So I'm going to make my pieces out of oven-fired clay. This is Sculpey, but you could also use FEMA or any other store brand, probably the cheapest is the best. So I'm going to cut this into a workable size and then just soften it up in my hands. You want it to be, it's a little stiff right out of the package, so you want it to be workable. All right, that's pretty good. Now it's pliable and it doesn't crack when I bend it. Also stain my hands the color of the clay. All right, so I'm going to roll it into the ball, and then I'm just going to flatten it out. I have 2 sticks that I'm going to use as guides. They're each about 1/8 of an inch tall, and I'm just going to roll it out like dough. And then I bought some cheap cookie cutters. This is a pretty good size, so I'm going to try to get 2 out of this. I'm rolling this out on a piece of wax paper just so it doesn't stick to the tabletop, and I'm using a piece of MDF below it because I know the MDF is perfectly flat and smooth, and my bench definitely is not. I like the size of these pieces, but they're kind of boring looking. I'm going to make the board pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is decorate the pieces. So these cookie cutters are flat on one side and fluted on the other. So I'm going to just carefully line this up and press the fluted shape into it. And then I bought this cool stamp. It's actually made for wax seals. It's got a scarab, kind of an Egyptian scarab design on it that I think is pretty cool. I'm going to center it into the fluted design. And the trick is to put equal pressure the whole way around. So I'm pretty pleased with that. So now I'm just going to roll out a bunch of this clay, cut it into circles, put the fluted design into it, use the brass stamp, and repeat this 12 times. Now, I haven't worked a ton with this oven fire clay before, but I'm learning that there's definitely a sweet spot when you're warming it up between too soft, where it's kind of sticky and too flexible, and too hard, where it wants to crack and doesn't take impressions well. So I bought this clay. This is, again, Sculpey, just because I really like the colors that it came in. But, you know, it definitely left an impression on my hands. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have just bought the cheaper stuff and painted it. Now, I did buy 2 of these little packs for each color I'm going to use, and I got 12 of these medallions out of it, plus this much left over, which isn't bad. I mean, it's not super expensive. These medallions are about 1.5 inches wide, and like I said, 1/8 of an inch thick. I could have made the clay go further if I made them smaller or thinner, but I like this size. All right, with these done, now I'm going to do the exact same process with a different color. Before you start working with a new color, you're going to want to clean all your tools off really well and scrub your hands. The red was surprisingly tenacious. I really had to scrub with a washcloth to get it off. But if you don't, you run the risk of blending your colors and getting something that you don't want. So scrub everything well before you start. All right, that is all 12 done of the green, all 12 done of the red. For what it's worth, the green didn't stain my hands nearly as badly. I know I said I would have just used the cheaper clay and painted it, but I gotta say, I really love the colors of this clay. And it's nice that it's gonna be the same color the whole way through, and I don't ever have to worry about paint chipping or coming off. So do what you want. Next is to take these over to the oven and bake them hard. All right, these are cool. When they just come out of the oven, when they're still warm, you don't want to fiddle with them because they're still a little pliable and you could bend them out of shape. But these ones are cool, and pretty pleased with the way these turned out. I was gonna dry brush them or add some paint to them, but I don't think I will. They look pretty good as is. So the next step is building the board, and I've already cut out the pieces for it. I had some cherry. I had a small piece of cherry that I cut into strips, and I had some leftover wenge from my house board, so I'm going to use that as a contrasting color. I didn't film me milling this up because I watch a lot of woodworking videos and I find that part really boring, but tell me in the comments if you want to see me running wood through a table saw and through a planer. I can film it, but if you're like me, boring. So the plan is I'll use the cherry as the squares, and I'll put a strip of this wenge in between to mark the playing spaces, and then I'll put a border of the wenge the whole way around. So the next thing I'm going to do is glue this panel up, and then I'll cut it into pieces so I can put the other wenge strips in between, and that'll give me the playing board, and then I just need to put the border of the dark wood the whole way around it, and that should be it. Got this out of clamps, ran it through my planer. Fortunately, my planer took a big chunk out of the edge, but fortunately I can put this side down, and this side still has an interesting grain pattern. So next I will take this to the table saw, cut it up into sections, rotate them, and then I'll have my board. All right, have this piece out of my table saw. So now I have these squares and the strips, and all I need to do is put this wenge in between them, and that will differentiate the squares so that I'll have a playable board. Minor disaster here, a piece cracked. I have another crack here and here. I'm going to lose that, but not a big deal. I can glue that up. Got this out of the clamp and then took the sander to it. I sanded it up through, starting at 80 grit up to 220. Pretty pleased with this. Cleaned up the edges, and now I originally was going to put a frame around it out of this wenge, but the thing is, I didn't set out to make a veneer, but that's essentially what this is. It's so thin. And it's my own fault because, like a dum-dum, I started out with the finished size that I wanted the wood to be. And then after a couple passes through the planer, it got really thin. So I'm going to have to adhere this to a backer of some sort anyway. So I just glued up a couple pieces of the wenge, and I'm going to use this as a sort of platform. So I'll glue this on top of this. And I think before I do that, I'm going to chamfer the edges of the wenge real quick. All right, now I need to glue this veneer board to the wenge underneath. I'm going to try to be careful and not get glue up to the edge because I'm going to avoid squeeze out if I can. All right. Now I just need to square this up on the board, and you can see it wants to bend a little bit, so I'm going to use these cutoffs as cauls and try to clamp it down so that it doesn't bend. And just being careful in keeping it straight. Ugh, that is really bending. Adjust this a little bit so that it's square. Ugh, what a pain. Right. I think that's good. Now I need to clamp down this side. Try to get it square. All right, that looks yeah, you know what? I'm gonna put one more caul in the center just to make sure that there's no bow in the center of it too. Let me adjust these. Yeah, and then okay, obviously I added a bunch more clamps off camera. I got nervous that this thing was bending a little too much. So, I mean, that's the joke, right? That how many clamps you need for a project, one more than you own. But with all these clamps on here, hopefully this will be nice and flat. Let's see, this. Wow, that is not flat. That is, there is a huge curve to that. I did not expect that. Huh. Well, you know what? Nobody else has ever seen a Seega board before either, so I'm just going to tell people that this is what it looks like. Traditional Seega boards have this bow on it. And we're done. I ended up putting 3 coats of that gloss clear coat on the top and bottom of the board, and I gotta say the wenge and cherry together look really nice. They don't need anything else other than this clear coat. I ended up putting the same gloss finish on the playing pieces. This oven-baked clay feels kind of plasticky and looks kind of dull, so I decided just to lean into it, and the clear coat makes it look like a nice shiny plastic playing piece. As a reminder, if you want to learn more about this game, Seega, I have a video about the rules, history, and strategy linked down in the description below. And finally, if this is the kind of stuff you enjoy, please like and subscribe. I put out new videos the 2nd and 4th Thursday of every month, and you don't want to miss any of the fun. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Gaming Bench.